and welcome to the third episode of How to Code That. Today we're gonna learn how to make this fake 3D effect using only HTML, CSS and JavaScript. There is no real 3D, no WebGL, so it's perfect for beginners that have never done WebGL before. This is just simple vanilla JavaScript and a little bit of CSS. Don't forget to subscribe on the YouTube channel and get the notification if you want to be notified every time I post a new tutorials. You can also support the channel on my Patreon, and you can get access to the code of this demo directly by subscribing to the Patreon. Alright, so let's get started. So first of all, for this tutorial, we're gonna need the Vite template that I've made. So you can find the template in the description, just close to the demo link. So that's a template that I've made that I'm using Vite. It's basically a compiler that is compiling our CSS, HTML, JavaScript. It's a really fast compiler. It's kind of like similar to Webpack. But you know, sometimes when using Webpack, the compilation can be very long and heavy, but with Vite, it's like super fast. So here for small projects, it's perfect. Okay, so first thing you need to do, it will be to clone the repository, or you can just download it as a zip. So here I'm gonna download it as a zip. I'm gonna put it inside of here. Okay, I'm gonna extract it. Cool. Okay, now I'm gonna open my text editor. And I'm going to open folder. I'm gonna open the template. Alright, so as you can see, we have a bunch of stuff already. So we have everything, the configuration for Vite. And we have an index.html with some text. And we have a Sass size files. I'm using Sass, but feel free to use any type of CSS you want. You can do vanilla CSS, whatever you want. Tailwind. Basically, we are just gonna write CSS with that. And we have a JavaScript folder with an index that is calling a component. Everything is not using a framework. That way you can implement this in any of frameworks because it's just pure JavaScript. So you can put it in any React, Vue, or Svelte, and Angular, anything you want. Okay, so we have a component already doing a bunch of stuff, and I'll get to that later. And we have also a public folder for images, but we are not gonna use it, or maybe you can use it if you want to add some images to your cards. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna open the terminal, go to the root of the project and do npm install. Okay, it should install everything. Okay, and then we're gonna do npm run dev. Then we're gonna click on this link. Okay, and you should have that happening in your browser. So if you don't have that, pause the video and make sure everything worked well, you have installed the dependency and run the right command. But usually you should have that. Okay, cool. So let's begin. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna remove a bunch of stuff in the index.html that we don't need. So first of all, you can see there is a footer here, section footer, but we don't need that. We also have a title here, and we don't need that as well. With already some JavaScript. All right, so now that we have cleaned that, you should have just a white page like that. All right, perfect. So now that we have that, we can start building the card. So basically, we are just gonna create a card using just HTML and CSS. So the first steps. But we're gonna create 3 cards, right? So we're gonna create a section, called cards. Inside of this section, we're gonna create a div called card. And inside this div component, we're gonna add like a title, right? So for example, an h2, and we're gonna call it card title. And you can write everything you want basically. We don't know. Okay, so we have our text here. It's showing in the browser. Perfect. So now we're gonna duplicate, just make it 3 times, right? Perfect. Okay, then now that we have that, we're gonna go inside our styles, components. Feel free to rename, we're gonna rename this this file. I'm gonna call it cards. Oops. Card CSS. Yeah, of course I'm getting an error because here we need to include it and not components. Here in the styles, you can add cards like that. Okay. And here we're gonna write some CSS. So first of all, the container. So we're gonna use displayFlex to basically just center the 3 components and make them center horizontally and vertically. And also we're gonna space them equally. So for that, I'm gonna just do a displayFlex line item center, justify content center, and then obviously we're gonna make it width 100% because we need to be the maximum. Same for the height. I think we can use VH here. I'm not sure. Well, we'll see. So we have a component here. Great. So this is center. Perfect. And then we're gonna add style to our card. Right. So to create card, we're gonna use the aspect ratio that basically allow you to keeping the same aspect ratio of a card, for example, when you resize. So that's very convenient for what we need here. So we're gonna say, like, I don't know, like, honestly, I think it should be bigger on the height, right? So the aspect ratio should be something like small here and bigger here, sorry. Something like that. We need to give it a width, otherwise its aspect ratio is not working. Here I'm gonna use a width in percentage, so that way when we resize this, the width is smaller and smaller. The width gets smaller and smaller, sorry. Okay. So we have our things here. We're gonna give it a background color. You can choose any color you want, really. We'll change that later. Cool, so we have our cards. Then we're gonna add a border radius just to make it look nice. Okay, perfect. We're gonna also center the text in the middle, vertically and horizontally. First, we're gonna also add some margins. So here I'm gonna put margin 0 on the top and bottom, and I'm gonna add on the side, left and right, I'm gonna use some viewport value again. So basically I'm just saying, oh, this is 2% of the whole width of the window. Okay, like that. I think it's looking great. Maybe less. Okay. I think the aspect ratio is a bit too big. I think that's better. Maybe like that, and maybe... I think I like it like that. Okay. Great. Now we just have to center the text, basically. Okay, so to do that, we're gonna reuse the same thing. We're gonna use a displayFlex, and it should work. Okay. Yeah, one last thing for the... So here it's working well, but as you can see, the text is very small when I'm getting on bigger screens. So we're just gonna use responsive font size using, again, the viewports. So let's say 2 viewports. All right, so I think that's okay. And if we make it bigger, see, it's gonna just follow, basically follows the size of your window. Okay, great. So I think we have something okay. I'm just gonna change the color because I don't really like it. So we're gonna change, we're gonna first change the color of the background. So we can either do it on the root folder, or in the components. I'm gonna put it in the parent, sorry. Okay, and we're gonna say, I don't know, something like bluish. Let's do it in directly in the. Yeah, we have a JavaScript error, but that's normal. That's because we didn't touch the JavaScript yet. But for now, we are just focusing on just HTML, CSS. So, okay, here. Okay, I'm gonna change the blue. Okay, sorry, I'm getting lost with these colors. It's not easy to always find the right colors. Okay, cool. Cool, so now we have something, but it's kind of like missing some depth, right? So if you want to make looks like 3D, I think we can add a box shadow. This is just CSS that basically gonna giving you some shadows. So we're gonna use this. Okay. Again, feel free to pause the video and make sure you have the correct CSS. Okay, so now we have like some box shadows, colors, and yeah, I think it's looking great. But we now want to, of course, make it 3D. So how are we gonna do that? Well, to do that, we're gonna use what it's called perspective in CSS. So basically, you can actually make 3D in CSS. It's native, it's in the browser. So basically, you can use something what's called a perspective, and it's basically giving you what we call the FOV, field of view, but in CSS. So it's kind of like calculation made by the browser. And as you can see, if you put a perspective like really strong, the cube will look like extending in the Z axis. And if you make it like not strong at all, it's gonna look really flat, like really close to you. So that's basically how perspective works in 3D. I'm not gonna go into much detail, but this is what we're gonna use to make our card acting like 3D. So here we're gonna use a perspective for each of our cards, right? So here we're gonna use a transform, and we're gonna say, okay, my perspective will be the width of the window. That way it's kind of like looking, I would say, almost like a normal perspective, I would say, that you can find in real life. And then to see it, because actually here we just have a perspective, we can use rotate. So we can use a rotate 3D, or we can use actually just a rotate Y angle. And we're gonna say, okay, it's in degrees, Celsius degrees. So if we want to, for example, rotate it on the Y axis like that, so like that, we can just say 45 degrees, right? Okay, and as you can see, it's working. You can also go in the other direction. Okay, so perfect. So now we've seen that we can already just do simple 3D using CSS. You can also rotate it in the X axis, of course, and doing the same thing. Okay, so seems pretty easy. We just have to write some CSS and you can have 3D. So wonderful. But now we want to make it dynamic, and we want to use the position of the mouse to make it feel real, you know, like make it feel alive almost. Like we can touch a 3D card. So for that, we're gonna clean, first of all, the JS file. All right, so let's have a look at the JS file. Okay, so first of all, we want to have a JavaScript component for each of our cards, right? I mean, we want the card to be a component, basically. So what we are using here in JavaScript is called a class, and it's basically have a constructor, and you can create as many instances you want of your file, basically, so of your class, sorry. So it's basically, I don't know how to explain that, but you can create multiple instances of classes, and that's basically what we want here, because we want one instance of a card component for this, one instance of a card component for this guy, and one instance of the card component for this. So what we're gonna do, go to the index.javascript. Here, I recommend to not query the div. So for each card HTML tag, we want to create a class that will be a card class or a component class if you want. So here we're gonna just add a data attribute just to select them more easily. So data card. If you're using React or whatever, use your React way, but you get the idea. Okay, so here we're gonna get cards else. I'm gonna do characteristic all, all. And for each of our card, so we're gonna do a for each. I'm gonna say card L. Sorry. So for each of our card, we're gonna create a new component and we're gonna put the card element inside of it. So here we are saying, okay, we're getting, of course, errors, but we'll see that later. Okay, so here basically we are just creating 3 class of this card, right? I'm gonna rename that card, make more sense. Card, right? And here now it's gonna be count. We're just doing some stuff, but basically here we're gonna call our card components. So feel free to pause the video to get this already. Now we have our card. First of all, let's have a look at what's happening here. So here we are getting the HTML element, so that's great. And we giving this element, we are attached this element to a property called L. Using this will allow us to use this element everywhere in the class, basically. Okay, so we have our L, we have our element, then we are calling a method. We are calling _resize. So for now, we are just gonna remove that. We are not gonna use it so far. Then we are calling set GUI. So we are not gonna use this as well. This is basically giving you this slider here. So we need to remove that. Then we are calling an event function method that is saying, okay, every time you're resizing with the window, call the _resize function. And we have also another function called _mouse move. So this one, we're gonna keep it. I'm just gonna remove that for now. So this is tracking the position of your mouse, basically. And then we also have, we are using a JSAP library, which is a library for animation. And we are using it to basically calling a function 60 times per second. So that's basically giving you something like to draw a lot of things easily. So here we're gonna clean it as well. Okay, I think we fixed the error. Here we have a bunch of other properties. So we have our L properties that is undefined here. We're gonna remove all of these actually. We don't need these for now. Okay. And we have something looking like this. Okay, cool. So for now we are good. So first thing we want to do is to track the position of the mouse. So to do that, just use the _mouse move function. So this event. And if you use eClient X and eClient Y, it should give you basically the current position of the mouse. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a console log. And we're gonna say, okay, so now as you can see, if I move the cursor, it's changing the value of here at the bottom. So here is 0, 0. Here is 0 to the width. Here it's width and height, maximum width, and here it's like maximum height and 0 minimum width. Okay, great. But now what we want is to have the position of the mouse for each card, basically. So what we want to do to create this effect, we want basically to say, okay, so if the mouse is at the center of it, the value of rotation is 0, because you don't want to rotate it if it's at 0. If you're at the very top of the card, the value will be the maximum rotation that you want to apply. So here it's called max angle. Minus this angle. And if you're at the bottom, you want the same value, but the positive value of it. So here it's gonna be, let's say, minus 25 degree, here 0 degree, and here 25 degree. Okay. So let's see how we can do that using our mouse position. So that's pretty simple, actually. You can get the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get the rect, what we call the rect bounding rectangle of our HTML tag. Okay, so to do that, just do this L. No, sorry, get bounding. I'm always forgetting how to write this function. Okay, it's get bounding client rect. So yeah, so we basically want to call the client rect here of this element. So we're gonna put that in the handle resize because this value is going to change every time you're resizing the window. So we are calling this function first of all the first time, so I think we can just have a look of what it's showing. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so here we have an object called DOMRECT, and it's basically giving you a lot of values, but you have, what we're gonna use is the X and Y. So this is saying, okay, so this card is at 773 pixels from the left part of the window, and Y this is saying like we have a 233 pixels from the top. And we're also getting the width of the card, and we're also getting the height of the card. So that's everything we want. So we're gonna use that to make our rotation. So first of all, we're gonna say, okay, how strongly we want to make it rotate. Okay, so for that, we're gonna call our max angle value. And we're gonna say, okay, I want it to be like, I don't know, 30 degree when I'm at the maximum and minus 30 degree when I am the minimum. So here we'll say the max angle is 30. Okay. So now a little bit complex, but like we said, we want this value to be 0 here, and here we want it to be the max angle. So for that, we're gonna say mouse Y, basically, width is going to be, or rotate Y. Let's say mouse Y. So the mouse compared to the element. So here, remember, we have our Y value, and we're gonna say, so from here 0 to 200, and we want to remove, first of all, the value of the 200. We want to remove the 200, so that way here it's 0, and here, so it's starting at 0 here, and then it's moving under. So remember, we are getting the offset of the Y position here already. So we can just say, hey, give me this value minus this one. Okay, pretty easy so far. And so let's see what we have here. Okay, so for each card, we are getting 0 here, so it's working, as you can see, minus here, and we are getting positive here, and here we're getting the maximum value, so the height. Okay, but we don't really want that, right? We don't want it to be 0 here. Sorry, I just changed some stuff, but basically, yeah, we were at this point, so I added the mouse Y here. It was 0 from the maximum height. So basically it's gonna say 0 here, max here, but what we wanted, remember, was we want the 0 to be here. Here we want the minus of the angle, and here we want the plus of the angle. So basically we're gonna use the height of the card to get this value. So the height of the card is already in this object, remember? It was this, right? So what we want to do is we're going to say this value, so the mouse value, we're gonna subtract the half of the height. If you subtract half of the height, so remember here it was 0, it's gonna give minus half of the card. Here it's gonna be 0, and here it's gonna be plus half of the card. So that's perfect. That's what we wanted. We just need then to transform these values from pixel to angle, but that's pretty easy. So first of all, we're gonna just remove what's this. So we're gonna do minus this divided by 2. So that way, as you can see the mouse, here it's minus almost 200. Here it's 0 at the center, and here it will be 200 at the bottom. Perfect, that's what we want. Then we just need to convert that into angle, into degrees. So to do that, we're gonna say rotate Y. And remember, so we have this value. And we're gonna say, okay, I want this value divided by so I want this value to be from 0 to 1. So if I want this value to be from 0 to 1, I need to divide it by the maximum value, so this value. Remember the height. Let's see, so this should be minus 1, 0, and 1. Let's see. Okay, so here we have minus 1, 0, and 1. Perfect. So now we just have to multiply by the max angle, right? Okay, and we have our rotate right. Now let's see how to apply this effect on a rotation. So remember we were using CSS for that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna add the CSS in JavaScript using the style attribute, and we're gonna say, okay, this element, I want to apply a style on it, I want to apply a transform, and I want to apply, remember, the perspective. Don't forget the perspective, 100 viewport, so the viewport of the window. And we're gonna apply a rotate X, even if it's Y, you will see Y. And then we're gonna apply, so that's just basically giving this value here. And we're gonna say degrees. So remember this value is from minus 30 to 30. Let's see, oh, okay, cool. So I think it's working, but as you can see, we still have some issues, but at least we have something working. So what we want to do first is we want to invert. So we're gonna just say minus. Okay, so now it's like we're putting pressure on the card on the top and here at the bottom. Okay, that's great, but we didn't check for the case where we are above the card. We are still lengthening the mouse position when we are getting above the card. So basically we want to remove, so we can either put the event listener on the card, but here we're gonna use a mouse event, a mouse enter and a mouse leave event that say, okay, if I'm hovering the card, apply this effect, and if I'm leaving the card, just don't apply this effect. So for that, we are just gonna say here, gonna add some new listeners. So we got a new event. So the first event is mouse enter. So that's the event when you are hovering the card. I'm gonna create a method for that. So handle mouse enter. And we're gonna do the same, but for when we leave the card. So the event is called mouse leave, and then mouse leave. All right. So now we're gonna call our two functions. Okay. And leave. Oops. And we're gonna say, when you're hovering, you can rotate. I'm gonna use a property called can rotate. We're gonna say, okay, you can rotate now. And here we're gonna say, okay, now you are not able to rotate because you're outside. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna predefine this property by saying like that, by default, you cannot rotate. So by default, you cannot rotate. If you are hovering the mouse, then you can rotate. And if you are leaving the card, sorry, you can't rotate. And so if this value is wrong, if this value is false, we're gonna say, okay, just stop, just don't call this. You are doing calculations for nothing. So basically, if you can't rotate, just do nothing. All right, so let's see now. So here I'm not hovering, and you can see, okay, I'm hovering and it's working. Okay, so it's working well, but as you can see, when I'm leaving, it should reset the position of this value to 0, right? Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. So to that, we're gonna just say, hey, okay, here, if you can't rotate, just put this value to 0, right? And don't do anything under. We are returning the function, so everything that is above this return is not called. All right, so here I'm doing that, and if I leave, okay, it's going back to 0. Okay, so I think we have something looking pretty great already, but we still have some bugs, right? It's kind of laggy, as you can see. Like if I put the mouse like just a little bit above it, it's like glitchy. So, okay, there is a solution for that, and we're gonna see that together. Okay, so to not having this glitch, we're gonna use what we call a linear interpolation, or LERP, if you have maybe already seen that. Basically, a LERP will gonna give you some smooth values between two values. So it's gonna compare the target value you're giving it and the current value, and it's gonna smoothly transform the current value to this target value. So what I mean by that is that here, if I'm at the really edge and the angle is like 30 degrees, if I'm out of the edge, it's getting from 30 to 0 degree instantly. But what we want to do is that we want to change the target value. So we're saying, okay, your actual target is 30, but now your target is 0. And what it's going to do is gonna smoothly decrease the value of 30 to 0. So you're gonna have a smooth effect that is going to basically move up the card a bit from 30 to 0 smoothly and not like hardly, what is the case right now. So to using LERP, we're gonna use what we call a request animation frame. So basically a function that is called 60 frames per second. So for that, we are using what we call the JZap ticker, and it's already calling this function for us. So basically this function is called 60 times per second. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create two values. Remember I said you need a target value and an actual value. So for that, we're gonna create here two properties. So the first will be the rotate Y, and the second will be the rotate Y target, remember. Okay, perfect. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna say, okay, apply the transformation on the card 60 times per second. So instead of doing it in the mouse move, basically this function is called every time your mouse has changed the position, we want to call it 60 times per second, which is more, but this is what we want. So basically saying, okay, transform this card 60 times per second, even if I'm not moving the mouse. So here, remember, we're gonna call our property, and we're gonna apply the value of the property here, remember? So here we are just saying the value that we want, I'm gonna change it every time you move the mouse, but it's gonna be applied 60 times per second. So let's see how it looks like. Okay, so this is looking the same. And yeah, we also need to say here, sorry, if you can't rotate, put this position to 0. Okay, so this is looking the same. If you go out, it's gonna be 0. But now it's 60 times per second. And now we're gonna use the linear interpolation to have this smooth transition between the target and the current value. So actually, I'm gonna just rename this target, because here, remember, we're gonna it's gonna be our target. And here we're gonna use the rotate Y. All right, perfect. So to use that, we already have in the utils folder into math, we have already the function that is giving you the linear interpolation. So that's basically just classic math. You don't need to worry about that. Just use this little tool, and it's gonna do the job. So here it's gonna be I think the target value. Here's gonna be the final value, and t is gonna be the coefficient of how smooth you want the value to be going from a target to the final value. So here we're gonna use, so it's gonna be rotate Y, it's going to be the LERP. So here we are calling the LERP function in here, it was already there. And we are saying, okay, so we want the target. Then we want the rotate value. And then we're gonna use a coefficient. Coefficient can be whatever you want. Here we're gonna put this value. Okay, so now let's see what's happening. Okay, I think I just removed I think it's the wrong value. I think it's target here, and here it's rotate. Let me double check just to be sure. Yeah, okay, that's the target in second position. Okay, let's see. Okay, so now what's happening? We are saying go from this value is going from his current value to the target, but smoothly using a coefficient of 0.1. And here we are changing the rotate target with the mouse, and here we are applying the smooth transition. And here we're using the value of the smooth transition to apply to our card. So as you can see, here, when I'm going out, it's smooth now. We don't have the glitch anymore. When we're going out, it's just doing something like that. So it's really way smoother, I would say, and it's working great on our card. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. You can change the value to see how it looks like. So if I put it like really small coefficient, it's gonna be super slow, as you can see. If I'm changing the mouse, it's really slow. But if I'm going out, it's gonna slowly going back like that. So feel free to find the perfect match for you. I think I was using 0.5. 0.5 is pretty great, as you can see. You don't have any glitch. When you're going from 30 to 0, it's working pretty well. You can do like that. Yeah, I don't know, but it's a bit slow. I think 8 is great. Okay. So once you're good with your coefficient, we can now apply this effect on the other rotation using exactly the same thing, but with the position, the X position of the mouse. All right, so we were already doing this thing here. So first of all, we're gonna add two more properties. So we're gonna add the rotate X property and the rotate X target property. It's gonna be 0 by default. Here we're gonna say if you're out of the card, change the target X to 0. Here we're gonna do the same calculation, but this time we're gonna say mouse X. We're gonna use X. We're gonna put the offset on the left of the card, so the X offset. Here, instead of using the height, we're gonna use the width. Basically the same calculation, but for the width. Here again, width, and here, X. And here the target will be X as well. Okay, so now we just have to use the LERP also on the rotate X. So rotate X, rotate X target. You can change the coefficient if you want from left to right, from left to top, sorry, but do whatever you want. And here we're gonna apply, remember, the CSS perspective, the Y, and X. That's it. Okay. So as you can see, it's inverted, so we just need to remove the minus. The invert is just needed for the y-axis for some reason. Okay, so now I think it's looking pretty great. We kind of have the effect that we want. It's working well. We have like a nice 3D effect, but we can do more, right? So let's see. But first of all, one thing I missed is that if we look at the values here, I mean, it's a small detail, but you know. Okay, so the value has between, you can see there are a lot of like number under the point here, the decimals number. We don't need to be as precise as this, right? So what we're gonna do is just, we're gonna round the value up or down, whatever, to, I think 2 decimals is already perfect and precise for one. For that, we're gonna just use 2 fixed. I'm gonna put it to 2. Okay. Okay, so now if we can have a look in the HTML, see, as you can see the values, now it's decimal 2 degrees, so it's less complex numbers for the browser, so that's better. Okay, so now that we have that, we can, as you can see here, we have even more interaction using the click, so it's making it more dynamic, so let's do that. All right, so for that, we're gonna first of all need to add a click event. So simple again, if you're using a framework, feel free to use your click event. Here I'm just doing it natively, and we're gonna say handle click, right? Pretty simple, just have to add a click here, and okay, clicked, just to be sure, can log it. Okay, so it's working. For accessibility, it's always nice when you are doing a click event to change the cursor to pointer. So just in CSS, pointer. Okay, my CSS is really ugly. Feel free to change this as you want. Some people like it to clean it alphabetically like that, but you can do whatever you want, actually. It's up to you. I like it alphabetically, I think. Okay, so now we have the cursor when you hover, so it's better, right? Let's make it more interactive when you really want to click on this card. So now, but when you're clicking, it's nothing's happening. So let's add some animation. And for animation, remember that we're using JZap, so it's a perfect time to use it as well to apply some transformation. So here using JZap, we're gonna call twin. So this is saying basically give me an object and I'm gonna twin the values. So we can say, okay, I'm gonna use this object. So I'm gonna use the class actually, and I'm gonna, what we want to update is we want to update the target. Remember? Because here, every time per second, we are changing the target based on that. So we're gonna say, okay, if you click on me, then, change this rotate target value to, let's say, 180, so it's gonna be around. Okay. Then we're gonna apply the duration, so we want this to be 2 seconds. Remember that we also have a delay using our LERP, so it's gonna be a little bit more than 2 seconds, but here it's not important. Okay, so if I click, okay, it's working. But as you can see, it's working, it's a bit slow, first of all. And as you can see, if I move the mouse, it's going back. So it's going crazy here, that we don't want to do that. Okay, I forgot to mention, but you can always change the max angle if you don't like it. So it's like, if I am using a big angle, then it's doing more rotations, I would say. Strongest rotations. I think 25, I think I used 25 here, but I used a GUI to change it live. So feel free to choose the perfect angle you want. I think here 25 is great. Okay. And also, I don't think we want to rotate it that way. We want to rotate it on the X, so like that. Okay, cool. Okay. So what we need to do is saying, okay, if you clicked on it, we are saying, okay, this is flipping, right? And when this is flipping, you don't want to change the values here. So basically, if this is flipping, just say, don't change the values based on the mouse position. Just use this animation and nothing else. So is flipping by default will be false. And here when we click on it, it's gonna say true. So now if I click, okay, and now see it's working. So if I clicked, then if I move the mouse, nothing's happening here. So that's what we want. However, we still want to make it move after we clicked on it, right? So for that, we're gonna say, hey, when this is done, so you can call incomplete, sorry. Once this is done, say is flipping is now false. Okay, so as you can see, it's working, but we still have an issue. The issue is that now that we have rotated, we have changed the rotating target by 182, we need to add an offset here of the value here. So for that, we're gonna say, okay, I need an offset X, offset rotate X. At the beginning, it's gonna be 0. And once we're done here, it's gonna be 180. The reason is because that way we're gonna rotate it as your mouse move, but in reverse. So we need to hide 180 degrees, so it's gonna work in reverse. So here, remember the offset X, and we need to add it to rotate X, I think, because we are changing rotate X target. And don't forget to add it as well here. So at the beginning it's 0, but when you clicked on it for the first time, it's gonna be 180. So here I'm clicking, and here, okay, cool, it's working already. So cool. So basically at the beginning it's like that, and when we click once, it's 180. But what if we want to click it back? Okay, so, okay, I think also when you click on it, you probably want to change the value of the rotate The other rotation, you want it to be 0. Just to basically clean any movement. Okay, so it's just doing like that. I mean, we don't have to do that, it's up to you. Yeah, feel free to do any animation with 3D cards that you want to do. You can like make them appear from above, make them rotate as they appear. Now that you know how it works, it's pretty easy. Okay, so now, yeah, remember we want to say, oh, if it's flipped already, then instead of rotating by 180, just rotate it back to 0. So we're gonna say, first of all, it's gonna be flipped by default. So not flipped by default. Here we're gonna say if this is flipped, then it's not flipped. And the opposite. So to do that, you can just do it equal the invert of flipped. Here we're gonna say if this is flipped, I want this to be 0. So this is native JavaScript, and if it's not, I want it to be 182, and here the same. Okay, I don't know if you should change the flipped. I think we should change the flipped at the end of the animation. So let's see. So we are saying if you're flipped already, change it to 0. If you're not flipped, change it to 180. And here the same. We are changing the offset rotatix. And remember, the offset rotatix is used everywhere, so it's gonna work. And here we're saying once it's done, change the value of flipped. Basically toggle the value of is flipped. So let's see. First time it's working. And then second time, yeah, going back to the other way. And the mouse position is working. Cool. Okay, I think that's it for this tutorial. Again, you can be creative, like add any effect you want. As you can see here, I use some images that I found. But like, again, I added like an animation on the first time. You can find the code in the demo, again, if you are supporting on my Patreon. And yeah, that's it. I hope you guys learned something. If you don't, I encourage you to check the other tutorials because they are more complex for WebGL stuff. This one was pretty easy. And if you learned something, like that's amazing. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe. And if you guys finish the exercise, feel free to send me your link of what you did, what you created in the comments. So I'll be super excited to see what you guys are capable of. So yeah, that's it. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.